Got a really cool video for you today. It's about Marvel Snap. This is the new card game unveiled. I'm sponsored to bring you this video. What qualifies me to do so? Well, I've played hundreds of hours of Snap. It is a really good game and I've played a lot of it. I was in the Friends and Family Alpha. Now, I might actually be the highest tournament winner in Snap so far because they held private tournaments, and I'll have you know I am a champion. Now, I can't possibly compare to the charismatic Brode in explaining the basics of Marvel, so take it away, truncated version, Brode.
I am so excited to show you what we've been working on for the last 4 years.
The first thing that makes Marvel Snap different than other CCGs is how fast the games are. Each game is about 3 minutes.
We've taken your opponent's turns and your turns and layered them on top of each other so that you don't have any waiting. It's just your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn. You get to make all the decisions in half the time.
Another example is deck building.
Once upon a time, card games had 60 card decks. You could play 4 copies of any card, which was actually just 15 unique cards. And so in Marvel Snap, we thought, hey, what if we just did 15 unique cards? And actually the games are so fast, we can go down to 12 cards, which is still about the same amount of strategic depth, but it's so much easier to build a deck.
Now, 12 cards for slots in your deck may not sound like a lot. However, I will assure you, every single card you put in has a huge impact in your game, because in an average game, you're going to draw 9 out of the 12 cards in your deck. So you're going to see 75% of the cards in your deck each game. If you take out one card and you put in one of your pet favorite cards, or one card that you're targeting the environment with, or like a tech card, you are really going to be playing that deck very differently.
It's played over 3 locations, and your goal is to win 2 out of the 3 locations. So the mind games start to happen as you start shuffling your cards around and trying to figure out how to outwit your opponent to secure 2 out of the 3 locations.
It's really important to us that you're not paying for power. The game is free to play, and you can get every card in the game over time without paying anything.
There's a very strong chance that I will do a free-to-play run through Snap. That is a very valid way to go, as they say themselves. Part of the monetization actually comes from cool variants for each card. So progress through the game, and if you want to look cool, pay out some money, but you can also look cool just by progressing in the game as well.
The skill cap is really high. I think you can play the Snap for thousands of hours and not feel like you've perfected it.
When no game feels the same, you feel like you're always learning. I think that's what's really important for a game feeling like it has meaningful depth.
And follow us on our social media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, everything. And go to marvelsnap.com, sign up for the beta. It starts soon. We'd love to play some games with you. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Sign up now, link below. Let's take a look at Brode's gameplay and see how much I agree or disagree with his gameplay as I harshly critique. So let me explain the premise real quick. 6 turns in the game, 3 locations. Your goal is to win 2 out of those 3 locations, or feel free to win them all. On round 1, you get 1 mana. On round 6, you get 6 mana. On each card, there's a mana cost, and then there's a actual power. That's how much power that card provides to the specific location. One of the really cool things about the game is that there are over 60 plus locations, and they're going to add a new location each week to the game. This creates a lot of gameplay divergence and a lot of variability, and if they're going to make a location featured more often, it'll change up what deck is best a lot of times. Part of the mystique of the game is you don't actually know what the locations are beforehand. They're randomized. Some of them are hugely impactful. The X Mansion, for example, is going to provide a really impactful effect. On turn 3, you just add a random card here for each player, and someone could get a really strong card. How do you counter that randomness? Just retreat if you get a bad result. Every single turn of the game, you should be thinking about whether or not you should snap, and whether or not you should retreat. All the games are worth a different amount. It's not just about winning and losing to win a cube. If you click that cube, the game is suddenly going to be changed from worth 1 to worth 2. At the end of the game as well, the cube doubles again, so if someone has snapped previously, it'll be worth 4. And if your opponent happens to snap, it could be worth up to 8. So that's amazing that one game could be worth 8 times as much as another game. If you lose a bunch of 1 games and you win like a 4 game, you can have a 20% win rate and like still break even. In poker, there's something called fold equity. Whenever you snap, your opponent has a chance to retreat, but they don't necessarily know whether you're that strong or like maybe you're actually bluffing. It really creates a lot of psychological gameplay between you and your opponent, which is really, really good. They capture it very well in 6 turns. You play a lot of games and you get to experience a lot of snaps. You get to experience a lot of decisions on whether to retreat or not. It's so good. X-Mansion immediately makes it that at the end of turn 3, so basically during turn 4, there's a very good chance that someone is going to snap.
I have 2 options here. I can play Ant-Man or Yondu. Ant-Man gets a bonus, an ongoing ability to give me a bonus if I have 3 of the cards of the location. I think X-Mansion is the most likely case where I'll be able to have 3 of the cards because it's going to add its own card at the end of turn 3, making that a little bit easier for me.
This is a surprising misplay by Brode on turn 1. Yondu is definitely going to be the card that you want to play on turn 1. It's like if you put Yondu in your deck, it's meant to be there to scout out your opponent's deck a bit. As usual, destroying the top of the opponent's deck doesn't really matter since you don't really draw the entirety of your deck. But the point is, Ant-Man is a good surprise, and if your opponent knows right off the bat that you're going to aim to play a bunch of cards in one slot, then they can play around that by like trying to avoid that slot. Or they can do like a surprise way of removing one of the cards on the X-Mansion on the last turn. Which will make Ant-Man turn off, and then you paid 1 mana for 1 power, which is super not worth it.
My opponent didn't play anything on turn 1, so here it is turn 2. Middle location is Crimson Cosmos. 1, 2, and 3 cost cards can't be played here. I only have 1, 2, and 3 cost cards, so that's not great for me. I do have 2 energy to spend this turn, so I'm going to play Rocket Raccoon. If I guess correctly where my opponent's going to play, I'll get a little bit of a bonus there for Rocket Raccoon. I can also play Yondu because I have an extra energy to spend. And I'll toss Yondu over to the right location.
I'm going to actually emphasize how risky it is to play in the will be revealed next turn slot, because it could have a negative effect. For example, the Space Throne, where you can only play 1 card there, then you have a 2 power card on that spot. So it's very big risk whenever you play a card into the unknown. Sometimes, that's fine. You're willing to take the risk, because sometimes it is good that you played it before the card was revealed, because sometimes having a card there is good. Sometimes after the card flips, it becomes impossible to play cards there. For example, the Crimson Cosmos, you could have played a 1 cost there before it flipped, and then it would flip, and then you would have an advantage. The point is, though, playing there is dangerous, and also playing a second card in X-Mansion is a little bit dangerous. It was a good idea to not play both of the cards on the X-Mansion, even though Ant-Man is trying to have multiple cards there, because once you have your 4th card, the location locks up and you cannot play any further cards there. Once your opponent knows the exact number that you can have at a location, they can play very precisely and then try to beat that location by only 1 power. That's basically how you get the biggest advantage in the game. Try to win a location with just beating a little bit higher than your opponent.
And I'll toss Yondu over to the right location. And it destroys the top card of my opponent's deck. I did guess correctly where my opponent's going to play, so I got that extra boost for Rocket Raccoon. Yondu destroys Star-Lord. That's a bummer. And Electra destroys the Rocket Raccoon I just played. That's unfortunate.
So that was actually a big misplay by the opponent. And you might be wondering also, which side went first there? Like, why was Electra able to kill the raccoon? Whoever's winning reveals all of their cards first. Because Brode has 1 location and the opponent has 0 locations, Brode is winning. Generally, it is therefore advantageous to be in the losing position because your cards flip second. The Electra ends up being, in my opinion, a misplay, because this is the type of play that can surprise your opponent. Your opponent has 4 cards in the X-Mansion. You play the Electra on the last turn, and then you can like surprise take away a win. This is a really impactful 1-cost card, and it's really cool how there are cards that are this impactful that you get actually relatively early. I mean, there's a card progression, and when I played, Electra was given pretty early in the progression. Disruption cards are really, really cool in this game and can flip a location on its heels.
So 3rd location here is Nowhere. when you play a card here, destroy it. So I got very lucky that I got Yondu in before it revealed, and so it didn't get affected by its trigger.
That's an example of a location where if you play before the card is flipped, you actually got an advantage. So risky to play a card on a location before it gets flipped, but can have great benefits. Perhaps Brode is winning by enough of a margin now, especially since Brode is one of the ways to cheat a card onto nowhere, so is Mr. Sinister, that he kind of has nowhere locked in, so snapping now might be good. Snapping at kind of any point where you believe that you're ahead and that you're more likely to win the game than your opponent is good. You make the stakes higher at a point where you're going to be winning the game more often. Snapping is a really critical skill, which is why I spent so much time in my analysis talking about snapping. It's going to be such a thing that you want to consider every single turn of the game, and there's like only 6 turns in the game, so whether or not to double the stakes is a really big part of the game, and it's incredible the amount of play and counterplay that snapping represents. It's a big skill tester when you get snapped too, to decide whether to retreat or not to retreat.
So I'm going to play a Koya. Koya says add 2 power to every card in your deck. So every card I draw from now on will get a bonus. And this is turn 3. So after this turn, we're going to see what pops out of X Mansion here. Here goes a Koye, giving me +2 power to every card in my deck. My opponent played Rogue! Oh no, now Rogue, if she touches somebody, she steals their power. So she's gonna fly over and touch Ant-Man, stealing his ongoing ability. And now Ant-Man does nothing and Rogue has Ant-Man's power. And let's see what pops out of the X-Mansion. Death is great for me. 12 power is humongous. And my opponent flips Hobgoblin. Oh no, he has -8 power, but Hobgoblin flies over to my side of the location, giving me -8 power and taking the last slot at X-Mansion, which is absolutely terrible for me.
Now, I'm glad that Brode mentioned that, because it is such a big deal when you or your opponent has the 4th card in a spot. Under normal circumstances, X-Mansion is topped off at 6 for Brode here. So all Parsnip needs to do is add 5 power to X-Mansion to win, which is a really small investment in order to like guaranteed win a spot. So at this point, if I were Parsnip, I would be like, okay, so all I have to do is put a very small amount into X-Mansion. I even have the Rogue stealing Ant-Man, so if I have cheap cards, I can just put 2 cheap cards in the X-Mansion and win. Then I just need to focus on winning another spot. If my deck isn't good at nowhere, then I can focus perhaps on Crimson Cosmos and then win that thing. So at this point, if I were Parsnip, I would snap. Now the interesting thing is this. Even if your Parsnip and your hand is nothing, it's absolute trash, you might actually snap anyways, because the situation looks so bad on Brode's side, where X-Mansion is basically lost for a very minimal cost, and he has to fight both Crimson Cosmos and Nowhere. Especially if Parsnip knows that Brode's deck has a lot of 1s, 2s, and 3s in it, then this is an easy snap no matter how bad your hand is, and that is a really fascinating part of Snap. There's imperfect information, you don't know what the opponent has, and the snap is just an indicator of, I believe I can beat you. Or it's a big bluff, and if your opponent looks like they're in particularly dire straits due to perhaps some random effects, you can take advantage of that. So that's a really big skill testing element. I want to emphasize again, no matter how bad your hand is as Parsnip, you snap here, and there's a very high chance your opponent runs away.
I'm going to play Brood to the right. It's going to summon Broodlings. They're not played, they're just added, so they don't get affected by Nowhere's triggered effect. Gives me a little bit more power to Nowhere in case he does find a way to sneak a card into that location without playing it.
So yeah, Brode's in a pretty tough spot right now. He plays Brood over at Nowhere, which is a fine play. Gets 4 power into Nowhere. It's kind of tricky to get power into Nowhere, so there's got Nowhere. If you're Brode, you're basically looking to win Nowhere and you're looking to win Crimson Cosmos. You think you have no chance of winning X-Mansion, of course. But if you're Brode, you know that you have nothing you can actually play in the Crimson Cosmos based on your hand, so if you got snapped into, you should just retreat.
So there goes Brood, he dies. There's Nightcrawler, so that's a way to sneak a card out into Nowhere. Nightcrawler can move once a game. Ironheart can buffs 3 of your cards, so actually has a little bit of stronger Nightcrawler now.
That's a really good play by Parsnip. Ironheart on the nowhere spot. If you can use your 0 cards, or your cards that have very little power themselves but have a really strong ability, and you can destroy them, that's good for you. The fewer cards you have out means the more cards you can actually play on the board. So for example, Ironheart on X Mansion would have been a very bad play.
So this is tough. I could just play Namor this turn, but I think I'm going to play Nakia. It's going to get destroyed, but it's going to buff Namor just that little bit more, which is helpful because I think it'll be the only card I end up playing to Crimson Cosmos, and I want it to be as strong as it possibly can be. And I'm looking at my board right now, and I'm thinking, I've got nowhere. I feel good about that. My opponent's going to get X Mansion. That's not great, but I have a big Namor, and I just won a game with a big Namor. I feel like I'm probably going to win this one too, so I'm going to snap. And when you snap, you say to your opponent, I'd like to double the stakes. I feel really, really good about winning this game, so I would like to play for more cubes. And your opponent is thinking, wow, okay, I could retreat right now for the 1. If I stay in, I risk 2. The winner's going to win 2, the loser's going to lose 2. Is that worth it? And they must be very confident. Maybe I should bail, or maybe they're bluffing me, and they want me to leave because they have a crappy hand.
So that was a really good explanation by Brode about all the mind games that occur when one snaps. I believe that he snapped for demonstration purposes here, but this is a huge misplay. It's such a tremendous misplay. He's betting on 2 things. 1, that nowhere will be won. 2, that 14 is enough to win the middle. But perhaps something that Brode is overlooking is the opponent's got a Nightcrawler. So Nightcrawler can move once, which means nowhere or Crimson Cosmos already has +4, because it can be assumed that Nightcrawler is going to move. That's one of the ways that the opponent could actually get some power onto nowhere. The plan is still easy for Parsnip. Either 10 power onto Crimson Cosmos, the middle one, or +3 onto nowhere, Nightcrawler +3, and then just a little bit on X Mansion.
They decided to stay in, so Nightcrawler moves to nowhere. That's interesting. They're no longer winning X Mansion, and it's not enough to win nowhere.
Now that's actually a huge misplay by Parsnip. Nightcrawler can only move once, and for whatever reason, they've decided that this is the time to move Nightcrawler. You'll waste your option to surprise your opponent on the last turn, and you lose so much flexibility.
Iron Man. Oh, well, that's really interesting. Well, 0 times 2 is still 0.
That might look like a really dumb play, but the key is whatever play Parsnip makes on the last turn is going to be double on Crimson Cosmos. This is a really good secure the win on Crimson Cosmos.
Any card they play there next is going to be humongous. It's going to be very hard for me to deal with. If they play Hulk or something, that's going to be 22 power. Namor's not enough to deal with something like that. They're going to have a huge... Oh no, they snapped also. Well, that's terrible for me.
So this is showing the particularly spicy double snap game. Normally the stakes are 1, and if neither side snaps, then on turn 6, the game is worth 2 if it goes from start to finish. I want to emphasize that that is not how a standard game of Snap at a high level is going to be played. Both sides would have to be very uncertain about their position, and even on the final turn, both sides are still uncertain about their position, and they're uncertain enough about the opponent's position that both sides decide not to retreat on top of that. It's a rare case, I would argue. Now, this is a really spicy outcome. Whereas normally, like, each game is played for 1 cube, and it's like, okay, one side snaps, one side decides, okay, I'm gonna get out of here, I'm gonna retreat and lose my cube. Or you get to the final part of the game, both sides don't snap, you play it out, it's worth 2 cubes. But the game has been amped to a staggering 8 cubes. And looking at the game situation here, as Brode will attest to, it is not looking good for him, and if not, showcasing, he would have retreated. All the information is out there. He's gonna play Namor in Crimson Cosmos, and it's going to be worth 14 because Namor is worth +5. The card stands alone. So what does Parsnip have to do in order to win? All he has to do is play 8 value in the middle, and then 1 value on X Mansion in order to win 2 locations. And you can see now that this Nightcrawler move is a gigantic misplay, because if he had Iron Man in the hand, he could have moved Nightcrawler over to there, and then it would have already been worth 8 of the requirement to beat Brode's 14. Now, part of the brilliance, on the other hand, is in this situation, if you snap, you actually should expect your opponent to concede. Brode absolutely should concede here. No doubt about it. The opponent is representing like such a amount of strength. It costs like maybe 1 mana worth of card to be able to beat the X Mansion, and then with 5 mana to play on the Crimson Cosmos card. Surely you can have a 5 mana card that is 8 power or more, because 5 is generally going to have 8 power or more. So this is actually a good snap on Parsnip's side, and if not for the fact that this is a showcase game, Brode would have conceded here, and Parsnip would be able to capture the 2 cubes even with a bluff hand. So it's a really cool show match game, and the big misplay is moving Nightcrawler. Without the Nightcrawler move, Parsnip would actually be favored instead of just bluffing favored here.
That just guarantees, in my mind, that they're gonna have some huge card there. Why would you snap if you didn't think you were gonna easily overcome my Namor? So yeah, if they snap now, the final cube's gonna be at 8 because the cube's been doubled twice. In a normal game on the ranked ladder here, I would absolutely retreat. I'm looking at a potential 8 cube loss here if I lose this game. I would rather just lose the 2 cubes, and I think, yeah, with Iron Man there, it's just, that's a lot of power coming down to Crimson Cosmos. I'm just not confident that I'll be able to beat that. I'd rather lose 2 cubes than 8, so I'm going to retreat. I'm going to bail out of this game. Now, because I'm showing the game off for the first time here, I'll stick it out to show you how this would have gone if I had stayed in. But yeah, there's no chance I think I win this game, especially because my opponent just snapped to let me know he's got a great play here on turn 6. Oh, he played 2 cards. He's going to try and go for expansion as well. Rock Slide, that's only 6 power. Doubled, it's not enough to defeat my Namor.
Rock Slide is a really weak card, but only 1 power was played on the left side, which is really good. The goal of the snap is to win 2 out of 3 locations, but when you really think about it, the goal of snap is to actually very slightly defeat your opponent on 2 locations. That means you have the most efficient win. Ideally, you like try to barely defeat your opponent on 3 locations, and then you end up missing 1, and then you end up winning 2 locations. Or there are strategies where you just go hard on 2 locations and give up the 3rd location. Pretty risky. However, one of the interesting things is, if Nightcrawler had not moved from the X Mansion just randomly over the nowhere, where he's doing nothing, Nightcrawler could have moved on the final turn over to the middle, and then this opponent has 20 power in the middle, 6 plus 4 times 2, and then that still would have won. So Brode mentions he would have retreated here, and it absolutely would have been correct, and he's showcasing a lot of surprise that he actually won this one. And it is a good match to actually showcase, because Parsnip got into a situation where he bluffed a snap, and it should have worked. That's going to be just such a glorious moment in Snap, when your hand is trash and you can't win, but you snap and your opponent concedes.
For real, I would have won this game. It was a bluff. He was trying to get me to concede so we could win the 2 cubes instead of having me stay in to win 8. Wow! I would have bought that bluff hook, line, and sinker if it was a real game. That is not what I expected. Rock Slide is not big enough.
I doubled down on saying this could be the best card game out there. And though this is a sponsored video, I genuinely say that. I played hundreds of hours of this game and wasn't allowed to talk about it until now because it was friends and family alpha. I've known about this game for quite some time. I'm very excited to see that it is now open for closed beta. At least you can sign up for it. Use the link below and sign up. Closed beta starts end of May. So go sign up. It's such a good game. And you should let me know if you're going to be interested in watching Snap Adventures with Trump